Hey, this is More Than Velocity. I'm Bart Pear here with Jordan Osagara, and today we have someone from KPI, the Kinetic Performance Institute. They're in California, just south of San Jose. Dan Cabuling, he's director of strength and conditioning over there, I believe. Does operations, and they've actually been using arm care quite a while over there. And so we just want to talk about the different ways they're using it and their facility as well. So Dan, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself first, welcome, and then just give me a little background of what KPI is and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I am the director of strength and conditioning. I also obviously run operations, and then I am currently the director of softball too. And KPI as a whole is start off as a baseball facility. We wanted to deliver both skill and physical development as individualized as possible, using technology to drive that process. So in the weight room, we're using force plates. On the mound, we're using TrackMan. We just got new force. If we're in the cages, we're using blast and hit tracks. And then, yeah, arm care was one of the new tools that we brought on. I want to say we've been using it for what, 2 years now, 3 years now, somewhere in that range. Like it's
Two
a
and a
decent
half, I
amount.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I started out on the baseball side. We have like 200 to 300 baseball players who come through our doors, depending on the time of the year. And then I've kind of shifted over to the softball front and been really trying to grow our softball population. We'll float between 50. We got up to 100 girls at one point. Just again, depends on the time of the season. Softball's a unique sport, unique industry. I learned a lot in the last 2 to 3 years specifically. I've been working with softball players since probably 2016, 2017. But my initial focus was arm care for them, arm care and throwing. That's the biggest need. You watch at the youth levels, and I've said this to all the families that I connect with. Like, if you can't throw hard, you can't throw accurately, you're gonna lose your spot. You're gonna lose your position. And so I think armcare.com is a tool that I've tested on the softball front. But we haven't gone full scale just because from a staffing standpoint, I haven't been able to roll that out. But hopefully in the near future, fall, upcoming winter, we'll be able to start using that with all of our softball players.
That's awesome. I know. I mean, I'd love to talk about softball because we always get questions. One, well, the throw's different. Like, does it matter? Will arm care work with it? And obviously, it does. You're dealing with the similar muscles and things. So, I'm curious, how are your softball players using our system?
So, really, it's been more of an assessment tool, meaning I started testing all of our softball players. I guess the biggest constraint with the way our softball session is set up is just time. With our pitchers on the baseball side, and I guess when I first started was with our hitters. So our hitters have 30 minutes before they get into the cages. So that 30 minutes of time, I tried rolling out armcare.com. It definitely is possible. But then the next constraint that I was under is just staffing. So
Mhm.
um, again, that's hopefully going to change in the near future. But it was just initially an assessment tool, and then I started using it as an assessment tool for the pitchers that I was working with, just to give them an understanding of like, hey, like you can't go throw 8 games in a weekend and expect to be perfect for all 8 games. Like you're gonna have effects of this. You're gonna have changes, right? Like their shoulder range of motion is gonna change. The muscles as far as like obviously the balance between the front and the back, like being able to explain that stuff because the in the softball world still like the belief is it's a natural motion. You can throw as much as you want and you should be perfect all the time. Like every game you throw, if you throw a ball, like that's a bad thing. And if you walk somebody, you're gonna get pulled. And the idea of perfection on the softball side is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I agree. There is definitely some myths that need to be busted around how much and the fatigue because and we deal and it's at almost at every level where they just think they can throw and throw and throw because it's not overhand that's they're fine and we're like well no there's fatigue there and stuff. So Jordan, you want to jump in on that or
Sure, yeah, we're getting a lot of the NCAA teams that are jumping on with softball now as well. We have a lot of them reaching out, getting information, and the big reason they're reaching out is again that common misconception where they go, everyone says they can just these girls can throw all day. Well, their shoulders and their elbows tend to disagree. So there's obviously a need for it to where it was a market we didn't even think existed. But it turns out there's a large need for it. So it's good to actually get some perspective on someone who has some background working on it because my background in softball is I've seen it played. but I know nothing about it. It's like horses and zebras. They kind of look similar, but they're two different animals when it comes down to it. So, yeah, I'm gonna defer to you fully on this.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing that I've learned, and I think my perspective is unique, and I view myself as an outsider in the softball world. Obviously, I never played it. I don't have a kid. Hopefully, I have a daughter now, so hopefully one day she plays some softball. But I've had to learn as much as I possibly can for the past 3 years because our bread and butter on the baseball side is our pitching program. Like that is our beast. Like that's where we got all of our athletes. And so that's the lifeblood of a team, right? You got good pitching, you're good. Softball's even crazier, right? You have one good pitcher and you can go off and win a bunch of games, especially if she throws really hard and's got good stuff. So picking people's brains, consuming as much content as I can. The one thing I found was the reason they're able to throw more than the baseball side is baseball, when you throw overhand, when you have to decelerate, you are in a very, very weak position, right? Softball, when you throw and you accelerate, they get connected. Their humerus, their upper arm gets connected to the rib cage, and it helps with deceleration. They have to brush, and the brush is not the forearm hitting their leg, but it's literally like the upper body of the arm has to get connected, and that allows to dissipate some of that force. And I always use the example: if I have 50 pounds of groceries and I hold them overhead, how long can you do that? I go, hey, I've got 50 pounds of groceries and I hold them by my side. I can hold them way longer in that position. I'm in a stronger position. It still doesn't mean that I don't have fatigue. It doesn't mean those muscles don't get affected, but my ability to decelerate and dissipate all of that force, you're just in a stronger spot as a softball player. And I think, again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have effects of fatigue. You just can handle more. The capacity is more, and it's easier to be stronger there because the muscles are now in a mechanically advantageous position to do their job versus the overhead spot. They're just not.
Mhm.
So you're doing assessments on them. What typically do you see for a softball player? Where are they weak? Where are you focusing your strength and conditioning?
So everything starts with a physical screen. We'll look at hip range of motion, spine range of motion, shoulder range of motion. Most common at the lower half is most boys tend to be more duck-footed. Most girls tend to be more pigeon-toed. ER, IR range of motion of the hip. If you tend to have more hip internal rotation, it puts your glutes and your hamstrings in a mechanically disadvantageous position. They can't use them. So you'll see girls, they'll tend to be very quad dominant, especially your pitchers. Usually the first go-to for the pitcher is when they go to load and come out of that loading phase of their back leg, they tend to, when they're younger, pop straight up. They don't maintain their torso angle as they go towards the catcher. And it's because, yeah, I put my foot on the gas pedal. I need my quads to generate force. But if I don't have my glutes and my hamstrings to then control that force, and I always use my hips as the car, get my car moving in the direction that I want to go, then my car is almost like the front tires are going to fly off the ground and I'm just going to lose my posture as I go forward. So that's really, really common. Extreme amounts of spine range of motion. Think like the gymnasts, contortionists, where like they can rotate. That's really, really common at the younger levels. And then hypermobile shoulders. Almost every screen. We do screens for two local junior colleges. We'll do screens, and I've screened most of our athletes in the facility. Joint hypermobility, like they have an excessive amount of shoulder range of motion. One of our local junior colleges, I've been helping out with their arm care. We use the arm care sensor for testing. We use the arm care sensor for then delivering individualized arm care to the athletes themselves. And then I've added the mechanical breakdown just to say, hey, like throwing mechanics wise, here's what we're working on. The amount of girls that can get to 170, 180 degrees of shoulder external rotation during the throwing motion is crazy. Like if you were to see it, you'd be like, how the heck do they even get there? And I think it's number one, joint hypermobility. Number two, a softball weighs more than a baseball. And so that extra weight with the lack of functional strength pulls them into really, really deep positions. And so it makes that need for strength extremely important.
So I let Bart know, in case you already answered some of this, I'm sorry. My internet connection keeps saying unstable, and I've only heard maybe about 25, 30% of what you just went through. So if I have you repeat something, just tell me, hey, I already went over that. But what are some of the things you've noticed? Because just anecdotally, we haven't dug too deep into the softball side of it, like we said. But what kind of performance gains have you seen? It seems like the girls, because of everything you said, hypermobility, lack of that strength, functional training, through using the arm care system, are getting, in a sense, some pretty high yield returns, especially on those younger girls and even those say freshmen, sophomores in college are getting some really quick performance spikes, as well as seeing some improvement in just their ability to recover. So I don't know if you've seen anything you can throw some tangible numbers on, but just anecdotally, that's kind of what I've been hearing.
Yeah, overhand throwing velocity is one of the areas I try and uh, be as humble as possible. I used to not be that way as a young coach. So as I've gotten older, try and keep that under control. And it is an area that I'm extremely confident in because, and it's not because of me, it's more due to the fact that they don't get taught how to throw correctly and the functional strength is so low. You take the average softball player up until probably eighth or ninth grade, maybe even I would say as far as maybe 12th grade, like literally a senior in high school, you would be a rare athlete as a softball player doing 10 push-ups and 10 pull-ups, like all the way through the youth level. So that again, functional strength is so low. And then mechanically, literally like, here's the bucket of balls. I'm an ex-baseball player, or I'm a dad that knows nothing about this sport because I love my daughter and I want to be out in the field with her because this is awesome. They're playing sports. Here's the bucket of balls. Good luck. And so if you have a strong arm, you're at catcher, you're at shortstop, you're at center field. If you're brave enough at the youth levels or a little crazy, or you want to pitch, then you'll go to that position. But basically, everybody else just gets fanned out to the rest. And so what we've seen as the strength increases, velocity shoots up like crazy. So I'd say at the youth levels, average throwing velocity that I've seen is probably 35 to 45 miles an hour. When I say youth levels, like we're probably going up to like first or second year 12U.
Mhm.
Baseball and softball is a little different. And so once they get to that stage where they're about to hit puberty, which is usually at 12U, where baseball is usually closer to 14U, you'll see a slight jump in like average throwing velocity. We'll probably get to that 45 to 50. But getting over that 50 miles an hour at the youth levels is, I would say, rare. What we've seen as they've improved the functional strength in the weight room, as we've improved mechanics, and the strength has a bigger influencer than the mechanical side. Throwing velocities can go up 5 to 10 miles an hour. Like I would say, like I've set the goal for every athlete that comes into our facility that's working on throwing velocity and wants to play high school ball and wants to play college ball. You should throw 55 miles an hour by your eighth grade year. If you throw 55, you will have a strong enough arm to play any position you want. And then again, the goal once you get to college, you got to throw over 60 miles an hour. And if you don't do that, you're probably not going to play the position you want to play. You'd be the shortstop in high school. You'll be a second baseman in college. You'll be the second baseman in college. You'll be playing right field. And so the throwing velocity piece, I'm pretty confident in our ability to see usually a 5 to 10 mile an hour increase with a structured plan, with arm care, with working on your mechanics and with the weight room added on top of it.
Yeah, and I think that goes for anything. And I think you made a very, very good point there that the strength piece almost is the higher payout than the mechanics piece in terms of that performance aspect. And I would agree highly with that. And we post these things online of our user testimonials. You see some guys are getting 17 mile an hour increases, but it's because they've gained so much strength. We track that with that. And to me, yes, you can get velocity changes by only focusing on mechanics, but is that a responsible velocity change? Because if we increase velocity by 1 mile an hour, we're increasing stress exponentially on the shoulder and elbow as well. Same goes for throwing a softball, whether you're a shortstop or if you're a quarterback or if you've thrown a javelin. We've had a lot of questions on javelin throwers recently too. You're going to increase that stress. So unless you have the strength to support that structure, you're not really increasing velocity in a responsible manner, in my mind. I don't know if you kind of want to go over how you monitor those velocities. Does it change when a girl starts throwing harder? Do you put a little more expectation on that strength management, or how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I'd say we'll test regularly, trying to make it more standardized. And I think the expectation is literally just number one, like mechanically, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Most common for softball is they'll throw sidearm. I'm really big on this. Throwing sidearm for softball is, I think chicken wing to me makes more sense, where it's like my arms down at my side and like really, really low here. I'm not actually throwing sidearm. In baseball, throwing sidearm is throwing sidearm. And so that, I feel like the mechanical side, making sure that that's pretty heading in the direction we needed it to. And then as we see an increase in throwing velocity, it's more just making sure now we're okay. We probably have the functional strength increasing with it. Mechanically, we're getting more sound, but mechanics tend to lag behind the strength, right? You can see somebody get stronger in 6 to 8 weeks, but you can see somebody's mechanics not change for 6 to 8 years if you right? Like mechanical changes are drastic, or take more time to stick, I guess. And so we'll then emphasize way more of that communication of like, how's your arm feeling? Where are you getting sore? What muscles do we need to address? And then again, I think another big difference between baseball and softball is like, we just need to get to that 55 to 60 miles an hour on average throwing velocity, and then we just got to hold it. We don't need to get to 80. We don't need to 90. We don't get to 100. We need to throw 60 miles an hour free and easy. And once you get there, it's like, all right, check the box. We're good. Move on to something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important aspect to understand is there is some minimums that you need to meet. And I just bring this up because we get a lot of pushback because, we highlight our guys who gain velocity, and obviously we're getting a lot of health in our product, which is one of the big things it does. But through that, you're also getting some performance improvement. And then everyone will always go, hey, well, you need to teach these guys how to pitch. It's like, I'm living proof. I played pro ball on pitchability, but I never got the big opportunity because I wasn't a hard thrower. So I didn't check those boxes. So I had to freaking grind my way through. If I would have known now, back then, it could have helped me out if I could have just improved that velo, maintained that velo, and then you can always learn pitchability. But you don't get the opportunity. You don't get everything that you necessarily want unless you check that physical box. So velo is still the number one thing. And then they'll say, well, it's the game's changed. There's a documentary entitled Fastball that goes back to like 1940 when everyone's like, we're throwing it. Can we throw it faster than a horse is running? Like it's always been a chase for velo. So velo's always been the king, regardless quarterbacking, softball, baseball. If you throw it faster, you're going to generally have a better opportunity for performance. So yeah, I think that's just a great way to look at it. It's like you check that box, you get to where that minimum is, and then you start building the skill around there. Because sometimes if you go the other way, you almost develop mentally and neurologically this governor on your system to where you limit your performance that you can do. And then I start running into a lot of guys where it's like, hey, you are capped out at 88 miles an hour because that's where you taught your body to dial in at 70%. And now we need to go through a whole different procedure to get you to break through that wall. So and fun story is in my area in Salt Lake, there's this, I call it a bad mentality of the youth coaching where everyone's like, just dial back to where you can kind of get it over the plate, because they're teaching these 8 and 9-year-olds just to go half effort with good intentions. But long term, then they get up to me when they're getting older and they're like, 65 miles an hour and they're generally around the zone, as opposed to how can we push that performance? So yesterday I had a guy throwing, the 4-ounce ball, just getting his arm moving. He's got all the strength where it needs to be. And he's starting out at like 78, 80. 80, 80. And then he gets 88, 89, 91, 91, 91. I go, okay, now grab the 5-ounce ball. And this was a guy who topped out with the 5-ounce ball over the season at 74 miles an hour, 76 miles an hour, I think. Grabs the 5-ounce ball, 85, 86, 87, 87. So it's like we're tricking that nervous system. We have the strength set, but now we need to get the nervous system to go, yeah, we can do this. But because he didn't check that box originally, they wanted him just to get the ball around the zone. But now he's setting himself up for failure, and we got to go back and train something that's really tough in that nervous system. So I just use that as an example. I like your mindset of going, let's check the box physically so we have the tool. So now you're at least interesting to the school you want to go to.
Yeah, I think the one that I've seen play out in softball, same mantra, accuracy. You need to be accurate. If you're a position player, it's all about accuracy. Pitchers, all about accuracy. For a position player, the softball field for the youth levels, it changes one time. You can get away with, at the youth levels, just pushing the ball. You'll see the dart throw. That's the accurate throw. And I won't throw hard, but I'll throw accurately, right? And so that dart throw is going to limit you as you get older, and changing those mechanics are really, really hard. You see the 12-year-old girl that's way bigger and taller than most of her classmates. And so that opportunity to develop that power and speed is just earlier. But again, the game at the youth levels is all incentivized to control, making sure we're accurate, making sure that we're not failing. And so I think the same thing happens on the softball side, both to the position players and to the pitchers, where you'll see pitchers, they'll literally like almost throw like slow pitch because they'd rather throw a strike than try and throw it hard and lose some accuracy. But that idea of perfection now pops back up again, and the expectation that, hey, I have to be this perfect player and I only throw strikes and I'm getting everybody out. And again, at the youth levels, softball is so far behind baseball. It's astounding to me. And it's just, I find it funny because we have all these ex-baseball players we're coaching it. So it's yeah, I think the same thing plays out. Now I'm really big on speed first. I know a lot of other coaches say that. Build the engine, make sure they know how to go fast. And then we can train the Corvette to be a little bit more controlled. We can train a Ferrari to be a little more controlled. Your Prius and your Honda Civic, like, good luck, dude. Like, you don't want to be a Honda Civic going into high school, right?
I
I'd
like
rather
it.
be,
I always use the Honda Civic example.
yeah, yep. So it's,
I I love that, Dan. I think and getting them stronger just gives them the confidence to push that, push that performance, which is great. But before we wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about injuries and soreness and, what are some of the things you're doing, arm care included, but not just arm care, to kind of, keep these softball players healthy, especially when they first start. And then as, the seasons get longer and you've got a lot of workloads involved. What is KPI doing? What are you doing in that regard?
most common screen shoulder flexion test, seeing my shoulder range of motion. Outcome, don't stretch. I would say 95% of youth softball players, I would say 95% of youth baseball and softball players don't need to stretch. Cross shoulder, tricep, forearm, stop stretching. You need to activate. They have plenty of range of motion. They don't have control. They don't have strength. And so by eliminating that, most common spot where this affects it is accuracy, right? I'm telling the muscles to relax. That's what stretching does. Well, if they're already relaxed and even hypermobile, then we tell them to relax even more. It's like, all right, I'm not going to do anything. And so you just have no control when you start playing catch. So number one thing I'd say, most softball players do not need to stretch. You need to activate. If you don't have bands, if you don't have weighted balls, you don't have some of those tools, literally do push-ups and just go slow on the way down and then reset, slow on the way down, reset, do 10 of those. You will throw more accurately, you will throw harder, not stretching. I think that from there, as far as the most common pain points for softball players, for position players, well, this is for both pitchers and position players, front of the shoulder.
Yep.
My internal rotators, my accelerators are really strong. My decelerators are really weak. My mechanics are poor. I'm going to get anterior shoulder soreness that usually pops up as they get older as bicep soreness. So those two areas, most common. Elbow soreness, not like baseball, usually not the medial portion, the tip of the elbow. Because I have this joint hypermobility, when I go to throw and I do almost like, again, my dart throw, I'm hammering the tip of my elbow, this bone, into my upper arm bone. And I'll get sore. The way I'll describe it to girls, they're like, hey, you get sore like right at the center of your elbow. It's not the medial portion, but the center. And they go, yeah, that gets really, really sore. And that's usually a mechanical issue. And so again, anterior shoulder, upper trap, bicep, and then maybe that center of the elbow. Those are the most common spots. They just got to get stronger. They need to get better with their push-ups, their pull-ups. We need more overhead strength. That scaption test always is the worst one. Interesting, at the college level, the grip test is pretty good. And the reason is, traditionally at the college level, everybody's doing more of a traditional weightlifting approach, Olympic lifts. So I'm gripping bars like crazy,
Yep.
cleans, deadlifts, all that. So my grip strength's pretty good, but my overhead strength, because bleeding into from the baseball and softball world, overhead strength is bad. Don't get good at being strong overhead, and so they don't get strong there. And so then they suck at that test. Again, going back to the mechanical breakdown, you can see this. You see as they release, it almost looks like their shoulder blades like flying off their body, and their arm kind of like gets disconnected. Again, it looks funky, and you can see it. And so yeah, those are the most common: anterior shoulder, front of the shoulder discomfort, upper trap, bicep. But hey, that's just muscle. You're fine. Yeah, just stretch it, because that's what, whenever sore, we just stretch and then ice it when you're done with that too. So softball's so far behind.
Yeah,
I'm
for those
excited.
that don't realize, he's being sarcastic.
Extremely sarcastic. Extremely sarcastic. Yeah. So yeah, those would be the big ones as far as discomfort. And you don't see, this is the part I'll finish with. It doesn't end in this catastrophic injury. Like the amount of like career-ending injuries that I've seen in softball, it doesn't really happen because they just quit. Girls are more pragmatic. This isn't fun. I suck. I'm quitting. My coach is screaming at me that I suck. I'm quitting. I'm not dealing with this. And so they'll burn out and quit. 12U first, or going into second year 12U, usually quit. Going into freshman to sophomore year of high school, usually quit. I've also seen a trend. They get to college, they finally make it. Sophomore year of college, they quit. And it's like, man, I got there, I got my college opportunity, and this is not fun anymore. My degree is around the corner. There's no $1 million check waiting for me after college softball. I'm gonna go become a lawyer or a doctor to do something and actually make some real money. So, yeah, I think the injury piece is real. It just gets swept under the rug in the softball world.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Dan, hey, I really appreciate your time. Obviously, if you're in the what's called Central Northern California, we'll call it
Yeah.
area. You should definitely be checking out KPI. They've got some great stuff, baseball and softball, obviously. Like I said, thanks for coming on, and until next time, take care.